Hello, everybody. Great welcome from four of us today. I'm in London, as usual. We have Deborah joining us from
Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas. And Joyce joining us for the very first time on Spiritual Awakening Circle. Joyce, where are you?
Cleveland, Ohio.
Amazing. And DeAnna, our viewers. Amazing. Our viewers are familiar with you, but just remind us, where are you joining us from today?
I'm in Florida.
Florida. So, okay. So it's a very cross-Atlantic meeting today. We are here to talk about your amazing stories about recovering from brain injuries. And we are here to also talk about the spiritual dimension of that journey. Deborah and I are co-hosting, so we'll be asking you questions. And I will ask Deborah to start. We'll ask you, lovely ladies, to talk to us briefly about yourself. And I would like to start from Joyce, please.
Hi, I'm Joyce Kostakis, as we mentioned earlier, and I am an author, and I also do project management for an insurance company. And I had my brain bleed in 2016, and so just kind of feel like I'm fully recovered, but had some spiritual experiences during the brain bleed and some after that I'm excited about sharing with you guys.
Amazing. And DeAnna?
What can I say about myself? I've always been a nature spirit person, and I'm interested in the ocean as well. This year in March is when I had an accident that affected my brain and injured me physically as well. It was a car accident where I was slammed both in the rear and the front. So I kind of bounced back and forth, and it really shook me up. So I've been recovering from that. And my spiritual tools, and in addition, the Spiritual Awakening Circle actually has helped me a lot in this recovery. So I want to talk about that.
Beautiful. Okay. I'll give you to Deborah for the first set of questions then.
So, let's see where to start. So I know Joyce, so I will ask DeAnna, and then Joyce jump in whenever, because I want to make it a broad question. What do you feel was the most impact on the brain itself, and where did you feel that you possibly changed from the person that you were before the experience of, like, for Joyce, the brain bleed, DeAnna, for the accident, where you were going along as one person and then started going along as a different person? Does that question make sense to you guys? So,
Sure.
DeAnna, let me start with you, just because I don't know you. So,
okay, well,
Good reason.
I was going along in my life, and what I was doing, was kind of a sidetrack from what I really love to do. So when I was struck in this accident, it was also the beginning of the coronavirus lockdowns. So it put me kind of isolated in a way. The brain injury itself, I wasn't really quite aware. Mainly because, when it hit me, I was also in a lot of physical pain. So I experienced that first. And then later on, when I started interacting with people and they were letting me know I wasn't communicating well, then I kind of understood that I had something more going on but it made my head like a lot more sensitive. I became very sensitive to light, sound, just different things like that. I felt better at night than in the day. So different changes. But, when you have an accident that's a serious, wow, I could have died in that one kind of experience, it kind of awakens one to, and certainly did to me, awaken me to like what's really important to me in my life.
Nice. I can very much understand the sensitivities piece, and when you said that, I was like, yep, this is all brain stuff. All right, Joyce, so what about you? What was your what was your experience prior, and then how did it change after your brain bleed?
Prior, I've always been into probably 20 years, 30 years, been into energy work, energy healing, Reiki, cranial sacral work, and always had like a full-time job in kind of like the normal world, if you would. And so I was always stacking and running and going and just, 30 minutes here, 2 hours there, just had very short windows between going from one to the other. When I had my brain bleed, I was in the hospital 8 days. I hallucinated all those entire 8 days. And so, because I had pressure on the brain, the hallucinations that I had made me feel like I was actually tapped into another dimension. And so when I got out, same thing as DeAnna, couldn't take a lot of sound, couldn't take a lot of noise, couldn't take more than one thing at a time. So it really slowed me down. I stopped stacking. I did a lot of internalizing. Deborah, I sent you my poem about second chances. So if you could share that with everyone. But I basically stopped multitasking, didn't have the TV on in the background. I would tell people if I was sensitive to sound. Like I went to a yoga class or meditation class, and she had this piano going, and to me piano is very painful now. And so I said, could you please not play the piano sound? And so the next class she's like, who's the girl that hated piano? And I'm like, okay, it's not about hating piano, it's about I have sensitivities now. And so just kind of sharing that with people, where before, I don't think I would have done that. I would have just kind of sat there and been quiet and suffered in silence, if you would. So I just feel like I'm more open now. I'm more aware of what I need, and that's my focus first before I start stacking for anyone else. And it's not a selfish thing to work on you first. So I feel like I'm more meditative. I definitely have empathy with people who have struggles with attention deficit, because the first year I had a hard time concentrating, and it just gets better every year that you kind of get your old self back. But then I chose not to be my old self. I recognized I could stack again, but I chose not to just kind of take things slowly, smell the roses, if you would.
Well, and that's so much of what you just mentioned is the piece of understanding. I think that's one of the things that we are doing with with these lives, is just helping people understand from a person's point of view so that they can change their point of view. So many people that get really frustrated, and not just parents or caregivers of children, but also, people that are coworkers. To just the language that you just used was perfect, like suffer along in silence. I did a lot of that, growing up, just feeling like, and thinking, well, this is just something that I have to deal with, not knowing that I had autism. And so it was very much you don't say anything. You don't want to bring attention. You don't. But now I feel like we're moving into such a different time where we have to speak up, because, the term suffering in silence is, I've met people that have said, I would rather just die than have to do this another day without people around me having some empathy, having some understanding of, what my experience is. And so that's what I feel like we're doing with these lives, is just helping people see, because you can't see from exactly from another person's point of view, but you can kind of see a little bit clearer if you're kind of next to them and understanding, from their point of view from the side. So that's what I really feel like we're doing. Monica, don't you agree? Just trying to get the word out of what people are really experiencing.
Absolutely. That's the intention. That's the whole project. It's not just live. So there is a whole structure behind which we are building, so we can promote that awareness and understanding and connecting people together. That's so important. And I want to go back to your stories, if I may. And Deborah put it so eloquently, and thank you so much for that. In terms of our intentions, but going back to your stories, I mean, it's a scary moment to lose your capacity to go through that process of recovery. What has kept you going? I just wonder, I've never been, I'm so, lucky. I've never been in that position. I've never had an accident of any kind. So to have such serious injury with potentially a massive impact on your life, and that there was that impact on your life you had to recover from, what kept you going? What was it? Were there people around you, or did you maybe found faith, spiritual inspiration to go through? Would you mind telling us more about it? I would like to start from DeAnna this time first.
Okay, well, I'm fortunate in that I have a lot of tools. I went through many years with a baby sister who was very ill, and one of the incidents in her very illness was a 6-week coma from which she came back from basically as a baby and had to regrow herself from a baby back to her adult self. So having experienced that, I already understood, that the sensitivity I knew was kind of something that was going on with me. I remember her going around and picking up shiny things all the time. It was just, wherever, she'd be like focused on one thing or another. But I developed tools through that, learning to kind of do meditation, and I sought those things out, particularly in the isolation environment of COVID. I really didn't want to go out anyway, since it was a car accident. I had some PTSD too. So, meditation was something I already understood. My mother did yoga. I grew up doing yoga. I prefer Tai Chi, actually. So, I began to, what I could do physically, began fortunate, and I would say this is a blessing, is that so many people, because of the COVID-19, started interacting a lot online and being real instead of just, with our party hats on, showing off whatever. Started having real conversations, real experiences. And also, some of the practitioners with Spiritual Awakening Circle and others who are, we'd love to have them, but are not necessarily involved, are doing online classes, guided meditations. I love music and dance. And so those are ways that I knew how to heal myself. I also learned over the years to tap into what I would call the inner healer, the inner doctor, and my higher self. Let that answer the questions. How am I going to rewire myself? Because I knew, being told, fortunately, that I wasn't quite right, and that everything was surreal for months. It was just like I was in just a whole nother world kind of place, talking to spirit friends as easily as people that are actually in the room, and not really connecting to whether they're different or not. That didn't really make a difference whether I was actually speaking to them or speaking to spirit friends, if you will. But I learned that, and I was comfortable with that because of my baby sister. She had tea parties with her spiritual friends all the time. And, that was kind of a living in a near-death experience. One thing that, I've always been an advocate for people with disabilities and different, I will call it different abilities, because it does bring out some special things. I know my awarenesses became very sensitive, and I think in some ways utilizing that as a gift. You know, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, coming out of the cloud, So I was grateful for many things going on online, because that was kind of a lifeline, if you will, to the reality of virtual reality. Seeing you guys on the internet and actually having these virtual meetings, is almost as good in a way as being with people to me. But the one thing that I wanted to really touch on is, the judgments, people judging other people based on even, I know it's natural, the first impression, whatever. But when you go, something's not quite right, maybe exploring that more than just making judgments, say, oh, I can't, don't want to deal with that or whatever. Because there is a lot of stigma, especially when your disability is not necessarily something one can see right off. So, learning, and asking people to really, and I love this show, this series, if you will, because I've watched Deborah, I've watched you and Monica a couple of times already. And I love that you're bringing out this awareness, connecting it to our spiritual selves, and helping people recognize that, even though we have different abilities, sometimes those are gifts. My sister certainly taught me so many things about life, and again, brought me the tools I needed at this time.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, DeAnna.
You're welcome.
That visible, not visible disability, for the lack of better word, is exactly what we are dealing with. People can't see, so maybe they shouldn't judge. Exactly, that would be a very good message to anyone. Thank you. Joyce, could you tell us how you managed to deal with your challenges?
Sure. So, when I was in the hospital, the neurologist came in the next day and he said that I should consider this a second chance, because very few people survived my type of brain damage or brain bleed. And so I kind of laughed, and he's like, no, this is your second chance. And so anytime I feel like, we all do the why am I here? I always feel like I need to tap into what's my second chance. Am I honoring it? And so as I go through my day, my week, my projects, I always stop and think, am I honoring my second chance? And so that kind of keeps me going, because I feel like we're all here for a reason. I feel like my brain bleed was a calling to say, you're still here because, you still have things that you have to do. So it just makes me aware that, I have to kind of use my voice and use my writing to help people either, do their own healing or their own self-work. And I feel like, between the Reiki and working on people physically, which is harder with the COVID, but I'm hoping my writing also gives people an awareness of having gifts. So just feel like honoring my second chance is always keeping me going. Something someone said to me the other day, and I wish I could say where they got it from, but we were talking about kind of impatience with people, maybe not being at the same level or not understanding what they're going through. And she said, anytime she looks at someone and feels like, impatient or frustrated, she hears God's voice in her ear, and he says, they're doing the best they can. And so when Brene Brown, I think it was Brene Brown, she has this couple being vulnerable series and stuff. But she says she steps back and sees it in a whole new empathetic patient light of they're doing the best they can. And so I think anytime, we're either with a stranger or with our friends or our family, always knowing that they're doing the best they can and not judging that, well, their good's not good enough, just try not to judge and just be there for them and hold space. I think it just kind of makes it a more, easier to let things go and to, be connected, if that makes sense.
Well, I think speaking to like the judgment piece, and it's an invisible injury, right? I mean, a brain bleed or a brain injury from an accident, anybody that you meet at the store or on the street, they're not going to know all of your history. Even family can be very unsupportive of people sometimes. Like, because I work, some of my work is with people with substance use issues. And, they say, well, my family just doesn't understand. And it in something like that, especially where it's like, oh, well, they're choosing not to, whenever I say to somebody, I can't do. Joyce and I were talking earlier about stacking, and I used to be a big stacker, and at the end of the day, even with autism, and I would at the end of the day, I just feel so exhausted because I was comparing myself to everybody else. And I really feel like getting diagnosed, because I got diagnosed, as an adult, it was just this way of like, now I understand. Like now, because autism also comes with ADHD, which is like the most evil marriage there can possibly be, because you get tired really fast, but you also feel like you're not doing enough. And so, and I want to go back to what DeAnna said, which was, it is that invisible, it's an invisible injury. And one thing that I think that's so interesting about COVID is that everybody, all these people that were go, 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 they're also having to slow down. And some people are realizing, oh, I can do less, because they've been forced to do less. But, we're just told all the time, do as much as you can. And, nobody needs very much sleep. And, we've been told all of these things where now it's like all these things, like what I'm seeing in my head is plates that were spinning that have just crashed. And so I kind of feel like those of us that have worked with adjusted brains, right, almost are ahead of the game. Kind of like DeAnna, you were saying, you had already had the experience of having your little sister. And so you were able to look and say, oh, okay, I can do this. This is acceptable. And so I kind of feel like that's what those of us that maybe were behind the game a little bit because of COVID, now we're further ahead of the game and are able to be those supports for other people and say, it really is okay that you don't get, I was telling Joyce, 17 things done in the day. You can get 3 things done in the day, and that is okay. I just feel like this is such a great opportunity for a reset with COVID of just like all these things that have been stacking. That's such a great, I love that term. I love that Joyce uses that term, stacking, and just saying, we're not going to die because we didn't get every single thing that was done on our plate. Joyce, do you want to talk about stacking? Because you're the one that I learned that from.
Sure.
I thought that brought it in.
For me,
I don't know.
For me, stacking is doing one appointment on top of the other. And so I worked full time in, the real world, if you would. And then I would go do Reiki on someone after work. And then I would go meet somebody for dinner. And then I would go, wind down with Deborah for, like a conversation. And so I felt like I was always, 30 minutes from going somewhere else. And so as I finished one, let's say I'm meeting Deborah for dinner, and if she's late, I'm sorry, now you only get me for 40 minutes because, you're 10 minutes late and I have to go here next. And so it was just moving from one thing to the other from the time I got up to the time I went to bed. And so what I feel now that's different for me is I feel like it's true I'm doing less. I'm doing less moving around and running around, but I'm doing more for me, for my unfoldment, for my spiritual growth. And as I meditate and come within, I learn what I can do for you, how I can help you heal, what messages I can give you. So it actually shifted from I don't actually have to run around to help people out. I can stay where I'm at. And now COVID is a good example of we can do a Zoom call. We don't have to drive an hour to somebody's house or I just like when I do, several things at one time, most of those are for me. They're either an hour of meditation or an hour of Zumba or, and then I go into my writing or I'll, do a Zoom call with my writers group. And so I just slowed down the need to run everywhere and I feel like I'm still serving people. Does that make sense?
Beautiful. Perfect. DeAnna, that seems to be similar to you as well. That sort of slowing down, enjoying more of whether it's even a virtual connection, but still enjoying that human connection.
Oh yeah. I'm actually enjoying the human connection more than ever before. Really, I preferred plants and flowers and animals most of my life, and so it's kind of nice actually connecting with people that I can feel comfortable and safe with, and so learning the self-care and learning that others are caring, that are out there. It's been nice to reach around the world because I'm not always sleeping during the night and not always awake during the day, this and that. So it's nice to have people around the world that I've been talking to over the online and even sometimes FaceTime and this and that. To just interact with and have that kind of people support. I've been living alone, so, not having interaction is not necessarily good. But I wanted to just really, Joyce, you talked about, slowing down and taking care of yourself and this and that. I was wondering, what did you do, or maybe Deborah also, because you've worked with yourself and these questions, like I'm at a place where I'm trying to figure out how to get back into being more focused. Since this injury, I kind of lost focus, lost an ability to really organize my head a lot. And so, if I don't write it down, and sometimes if I do, I forget where I wrote it down. Things like that, and to get back to, I used to be extremely organized. I'm a data analyst. And so, by profession, that requires a lot of organization and skill, focus too. But right now, I feel like that's one of my biggest challenges in the healing work that I'm trying to do on my own. So I wanted to kind of, while I have you all, and Monica, I know you have these experiences too, with your son especially, what kind of things, I'm kind of running out of my own tools, if you will. What kind of things would you suggest? Let me ask Joyce maybe if you'll address that first, and then Deborah and Monica perhaps.
Sure. Yeah. You reminded me of that first year. I had yellow stickies all over my house. I couldn't remember if I fed my animals or not, and I was double feeding them or starving them to death. So it was like, so if I fed them, I would put a yellow sticky saying fed, and then I'd put a yellow sticky on the door to the garage. Don't forget your purse, And so I noticed that to stay focused and start to remember more, I had to have less stimulation. So no TV. no radio. If I had anything on, it had to be positive. It wasn't the news with the ticker tape on the bottom and the little screen about what's coming next, and then the person talking. I'm like, do I read? Do I listen? Do I watch for what's next? I had to shut all that down. And once I shut all that down and sort of controlled my messaging, if you would, what was coming in, I noticed I got my concentration back, and I noticed I was using less notes. And so it took time, but it really was reducing all the stuff that was coming in. Was my biggest win, if you would.
Yeah.
A
And
noticeable change.
I'll speak to that too, which is I am very routined. I have a routine that I have to do first thing in the morning when I get up. That is, if anything throws that off, I can kind of feel thrown off for the whole day. And I used to feel like it was almost like a guilty pleasure that I was taking this time for myself. And now I've realized this is something I have to do to function properly. And, in fact, this morning I came in and my husband, everybody's working from home. He was sitting there with his, because he likes a lot of stimulation. He likes his laptop and the TV on with no sound and the stereo on and every light on in the house. And then I get up and I go around and I turn all the lights off. Because I sit and I read and it's short. This is the thing I want people to hear. So I have about this much coffee. It's usually about 15 or 20 minutes. I can almost time it perfectly. I read for that amount of time. I'm in a quiet space. And a lot of times I'll read 2 books at once. And then I will just look out the window. And that's my way of like letting my brain wake up, letting my anxiety kind of go down. And it's this much coffee. And I look at my cup every time and I'm like, okay, I've done, and it's really a practice, for me, but I have to, and I know that that's the completely opposite of my husband. And I appreciate that he allows, he doesn't get cranky when I come in and turn off all the lights or turn off the stereo or turn it down. He's very accepting and loving with me and what I need, but that is what I need. And people tell me all the time, you can just take notes on your phone. And I'm like, nope, I have to put pen to paper. I have to, and I'm a sticky note person too, but then if the note's been there for more than a day, I don't see it anymore. So I have to constantly be changing things out. And so, it is very much like it has to be a sticky. It can't be a note in my phone. It has to be, that routine that I do in the morning. Those are the ways that I'm, and it's comfort. Everything goes back to, am I taking care of myself? So I'll throw it up to you now, Monica, because I know you as a parent, you've probably learned some things too.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just say that without a brain injury and without any diagnosis, as far as I'm concerned, I do struggle with focus myself. So it must be something which we all share as a humankind. We've got better and worse days. So obviously those things are very helpful with keeping notes and sort of track on what one is doing. So with me, obviously that I'm looking at it from the carer's point of view. And with my son, it's very much down to visual prompts and routine. And that's that keeping the stimulus as low as possible so he can focus on one thing at the time. And that helps him to excel, because once he's focused, miracles happen. But give him that sort of distraction, anxiety. There will be lots of anger coming out, because I'm sort of, or not necessarily me, but the environment would try and take him out of that zone he's in. And that's very disturbing for him. He's only learning to control his emotions. So it's all very emotional at this stage. We went through, with my child, it's different, obviously, because he's learning the emotions. So we went through red, yellow, green, and blue zones for emotions themselves. so he could tell me how he feels before a big meltdown would happen.
Yeah.
And it's a process. Obviously, he's growing. He's trying very hard to learn his own behavior. I'm so proud of him. But I think DeAnna brought such an important question here. What are the actual challenges and how we can help ourselves, but also people around you can help you and can understand stuff. So what was very clear, which came out today, was that you do feel judged. And no one likes to be judged. I don't like to be judged, especially if it's an unfair judgment. So how, maybe just to sort of wrap up, we can think how we could help you in your everyday life, in our communication, how we can sort of, if there are ways we can help, actually. What do you think?
Well, I'll speak to that a bit, and that, I know, when I've talked to Nikki sometimes about our projects on the Spiritual Awakening Circle, sometimes she'll go, number 1, this, number 2, that, number 3, this, number 4, that. Write this down. Number 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, for me, that works. I could go, okay, I did it. And then if I follow those steps, I feel like I've succeeded. I really like what Joyce said, because I've been having trouble remembering to do things, or remembering if I did things, and putting up the sticky notes. Again, with Deborah mentioning, all the stimuli and how she prefers the quiet, I begin to think that maybe I should get in that habit, because I'm one of those, I like everything on too. I'll have the TV going with the sound off and the music on. I'll be on my computer and sometimes on my cell phone doing 2 different things on 2 different things. And for a long time, I was really quite able to function that way. But now I'm finding that the sensitivity that's come up has been, and I should really more simplify rather than be in that habit. I've been in the habit, the visual thing you mentioned, Monica. To me, sometimes the symbols and visual, the colors and things, sometimes I feel like I can communicate better. Say, oh, I'm feeling yellow today. So what does that mean to other people, unless we define it, like you have with your son? But, I think that, with the judgment, it's always been my basic premise to say, we're all doing the best we can with what we've got to work with, and, so I love that. And I just want to thank you all so much for sharing, because I'm really, even though I'm presenting and hopefully providing other people with some thoughts and ideas, I'm really getting a lot out of this as a meeting. So I really appreciate you putting on this program.
Thank you so much.
Well, and that's a whole other, I think that's another show, Monica, which is communicating through color. Because one thing that, and then I'll let Joyce go, because I wanted to say this really quick. I know somebody that they hear music as color. And so I think that, DeAnna, I think you just gave us a topic for another conversation, because that is, and I talked about that a little bit in a live a couple of times back, about how giving children color chips to be able to, nonverbal, that could communicate through color, because sometimes the words aren't there. The color is there, but I think that being able to say, okay, this color means this for me, DeAnna. And then you can, when the people around you know what your colors mean, so you're not trying to make your brain work 4 times harder than it has to. That's an important piece too. So, all right, now I'll let Joyce go.
One of the things I was going to say that is very helpful in my healing, it's called grounding, where you go outside. And so that thing where they say hug a tree, forest bathing, it really does remove inflammation from your body. It really does bring your nerves down. The color green when you're out there is very healing. Luckily, when this happened, I was in Portland, Oregon, and across the street from my house was a trail. And so every day I walked the trail, and I literally hugged a tree. And it was like I looked around. It's like somebody can see me out here hugging a tree. And by the end, people were walking on the path. I just leaned on the tree, like catching my breath, catching my breath. And then in the end, I was just like, I'm just hugging a tree. Get over it. So, but yeah, just getting outside as much you can is very, very healing.
Yeah, well, it kind of tells me to make a note that if you ever see anyone hugging a tree, do not judge. They are just having this grounding experience, and obviously get a lot out of nature, which is I know DeAnna works with nature spirit, and I can't live without nature these days. So I also feel it's I can see a difference in my son when we go for a walk, when we are surrounded by nature versus when we don't. So it's so important to get grounded. Absolutely. I'm going to mute myself because there is a bit of background noise. I will let Dora to ask anything she needs to do, and then we can maybe bring some comments from our viewers.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been looking at the comments. Yeah, someone said how wonderful respecting our inner integrity. I really need to listen more often. That and these are hard times which we need to feed our own souls through this. I will tell you this. I had this experience years ago, way before COVID, and I was at a meeting, a late meeting, and I said, I got a little bit of time today to myself, and I had done something that I think that this woman had seen as very self-indulgent, and which for me was just practicing self-care. And she looked at me with this almost angry face, and she said, well, that must be nice. And in my head, I was like, yeah, it is nice. It is nice, and you can do it too. And this was somebody that I knew that was just like stacking like crazy. She had like 3 different jobs. She was being the secretary for this organization that nobody else wanted to do it. So she just kept doing it. And I just was like, you can put some of that stuff down. And I think that's another piece of information for people to take is you don't have to do everything just because somebody asks you. In fact, I love that Joyce is the person on this with us right now because she taught me this. She said, if you do something and you're not wanting to do it, you might actually be taking joy away from the person that is next in line that person might call, that might actually enjoy doing the thing that you are having resentment around. And I really took that in because I used to do I would do everything because I thought I had to do everything if somebody asked me to do it. And when Joyce told me that, and I actually, Joyce, I tell my classes that now because a lot of the people that I see are doing way too much and they just think they have to do it all. Like, I think that's my message for this live, which is you don't have to do it all. You do not have to do it all. And you might be taking joy away from the next person that the person asked you to do that thing would call. So that's kind of my piece. And thank you for putting that in the comments because it really is true. Like, we don't have to do it all.
Oh gosh, amen to that. Such an important thing we can all agree to. And I think there was also this one beautiful comment from Sherry about appreciating the second chance. Sherry had her own battle with cancer, and she's now living her life to the fullest. She just put it in the comments, so therefore I can share it openly. And I think that's what really is coming down to, appreciating the moment, being in the moment, and being so in that state of gratitude, which I guess all of us know creates miracles. So if we can close with that positive message, unless you have any more comments or anything you would like to add, we can definitely come back and do another round of discussion. And that color code we were talking about, Deborah, I agree. We should do a live specifically on colors. See, does anyone have any comments, questions?
Well, I just love that you're going to follow up, and I love the positive message of being in the moment and appreciating our moments and living life to the fullest. You know, that is something I learned from my baby sister. You know, live fully, because you just never know what's going to happen. So living in the moment, finding the positive, being grateful for what we have rather than what, and thank you so much for y'all being here.
Thank you very much to everyone who watched, to everyone who will watch on the replay, and to all the participants, you beautiful ladies. So we'll say bye for now, and we'll see you again at some point. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.